The slide presentation is a modification of one I did as a longer workshop for Sitka Center for Art and Ecology. Most of the illustrations that are in the slideshow are from either artists or their studios or their collections, or from my own personal collection, or other things that sort of illustrate, keep it interesting. Just a couple of things. One is, this is my opinion. So there's no right way or wrong way to do this. It's an evolving process. And that's what's really exciting about collecting art. The other thing is, I already know some of you here, and I already know you are collectors. So it isn't just about how to start a collection. It's just talking about why collecting is vital to my life and maybe yours. So first, just what is a collection? The difference between, for me, acquiring things and what a collection is that at some point after you've acquired some things, it becomes obvious that there are some focal points of interest. And then from that point, when you recognize that, you might actually start to intentionally buy things that fit into those focal points. It doesn't mean you just have one collection. You might have sub topics that you are really interested in. But it's that focus, I think, that's really important. And then every collection has its own voice because you're all individuals, and so you're going to be collecting things that speak about yourself, really. And the last part I want to talk about are the Vogels, who you probably have heard of, because I think they're a great example of how you can collect on a budget and still amass an amazing collection. The Vogels were both worked for the Postal Service in New York City in the 50s. They lived on his salary, and they used her salary entirely for buying artworks. When they started, it was like $16,000 a year that they lived on, and $16,000 a year that they collected artwork on. But they got to know everyone in New York, the gallerists, the artists, and so they would go to the artist studios because they became friends with them. And so the artist would, know what the Vogels liked to collect, and would actually, if they had something that they thought the Vogels would like, they would contact them. And so the Vogels were able to collect some amazing things from the abstract expressionists and the modernists that are just amazing. A couple of years ago, when he passed away, they had set up a trust, and so they organized this exhibition that went to all 50 states, and every institution that the exhibit was seen, they donated one piece to that museum. So the idea was they wanted to donate one artwork to a museum in every state, and that's what they did. And I believe that this was actually shown at the Portland Art Museum years ago. So I think they're a great example of how you don't have to be really rich in order to collect a really important collection. We'll talk about relationships a little bit. First of all, that's my studio, and that's our gallery. And so while I'm going to talk about the focus on artists today, you need to understand that those artists have relationships with these galleries, and that's a really important one. And that if they're represented by a gallery, you are part of that triad. And there's a reason why artists are represented by these important dealers, which is that those dealers are furthering the career of the artist. So they are representing those artists, they're promoting them, they may be taking them to art fairs, they're interacting with curators to get their work placed in museums, they're trying to expand the collector base for that artist so that artists actually can make a living. So it's really important that that relationship is recognized and nurtured. I want to talk a little about Waterstone Gallery. And so we are an artist-run gallery. So we were founded in 1992, and then we were in this location for about 15 years, and we're moving in October to the Quintana space, which is at 124 Northwest 9th. So we have 17 artists. Most of them are mid-career artists. We have a few emerging artists, and we have a few late career artists, but in general, we're in that range. If someone leaves, then we replace that artist. And what we're looking for is how the work is made. We really want work that is crafted really well. That's something really, I think, is actually a hallmark of work made in the Northwest, first of all. And that's what we really care about as well. And secondly, we really want our artists to have a really developed identity and voice. The artists in our gallery are very community engaged. So by far, least half, if not more, have been art educators. We also have a lot that have served on art nonprofit boards. We like having that sense of community, and because we are sort of all mid-career artists, I think every one, maybe except for one, is in at least one museum collection or other public collections. So we are very fairly established artists that show here. I have many hats here, so I'm an artist, but I'm also a collector, and I'm also an educator. And I find knowing artists to really be an important part of my life. But most importantly, when you see the artwork, no matter how much you know about the artwork, it's the artwork that has to speak to you first and foremost. That actually has to grab you some way. So everything else that I'm going to talk about, educating yourself or getting to know the artist, that's all information that will enhance your appreciation of the work that you've already got a connection with. So where to meet artists? So go to their openings, introduce yourself to them, go to their, almost every Pata gallery, I believe, has an artist talk during the artist show. I heartily recommend you go to those talks. Ours is always the third Sunday of the month. So it's a great opportunity to go and meet the artist, hear them speak about their work, and introduce yourself if you're interested in their work or want to know more. Like our gallery, when we have a group show, we schedule demonstrations every Sunday of that month so you can actually see the artist making the work, which is a great way to also get more information about that. And take classes. Not that you need to be able to be a skilled artist to appreciate work, but taking a class from an artist that you're interested in really does see how that person's mind works, how their hands work, and gives you an appreciation for the technical difficulty that's involved in actually creating that piece of work. These days, if you do social media, which includes Facebook, Instagram, they're always just putting on new images about what they're doing in their studio. You can just follow it daily, which is another way to keep engaged. Really important, if you were going into some gallery and there was an artist you cared about, please tell that gallery owner you really like that person's work. When a new show comes up and you've told them that I really want a piece by X, you're going to get a call to come see that new work. And in here, of course, we do have a gallery mailing list, but we also have individual lists. We have a sign-up sheet on the desk here that you can just sign up for whatever artist whose list you want to be on. Now, the other thing I want to say, though, so, artists are visual communicators more than verbal, meaning someone else might be able to speak about that artist better than the artist can sometimes speak about it themselves. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to learn a lot by listening to what they have to say about their work. It's a unique take on their work. The artists have a reputation of not wanting to tell you about what's going on in the work, and that's why. One is they don't want to limit the interpretation of the work that you're seeing because it is bigger than them, in my opinion. They're bringing all of it to the work, and then you're bringing yourself to it and interpreting it on a further level. So following an artist over time. I'm going to talk about Martha Pfanschmidt this show because I've known Martha for over 30 years. And just knowing her for that long, I've seen her work change over 30 years. It gets more and more rich to understand what is going on in this work because I knew what she was doing 30 years ago. And she was a printmaker. She was really known for mezzotints, which are a type of etching. And then she started working in encaustic painting. And that's basically painting with beeswax that has pigment mixed in it on a solid substrate. Around the time she started doing this, she was also starting doing fused glass. You've probably seen her work in the Casey building. She has 4 huge panels in the lobby of the Casey building that very much relate to the encaustic work. So with fused glass, you look down into the layers like you can through an encaustic painting. So I've already gone over, 20 years. So this is absolutely brand new work for her in that she's calling them encaustic monotypes. So she's taking a plexiglass plate, she's covering it with wax, and then she's scribing into the wax like you would into a copper etching plate with different ways, different marks, and then she's inking up that plate, that wax plate, like you would a copper plate and putting the paper on and getting mirror image. So it's the plate that is actually wax. There's no wax on these works. Over 30 years, I saw her go through all of that and create this work. She's combining printmaking and her encaustic work. The work also, to me, it's abstract, of course, and so it's evocative. But I think most of you would think that there is some sort of reference to maps. And because I know Martha for so long, I knew her undergraduate degree was actually in geology, and her first job was as a cartographer. She was a map maker. So she's gone back 30 years to where she came from, combined everything she's worked on for 30 years to make the work you're looking at. So that's why I say following an artist over time deepens and enriches your understanding and experience of an artist's work. And finally, I have to say what not to expect when dealing with artists directly. First of all, they have to respect their relationship with their gallery. And secondly, it's hard to make a living, so don't expect a steep discount because you're working with them. Every gallery in PATA actually has its expertise, like Charles Hartman does, is based on photography. Laura Russo has sort of the classic regional art, I'd say. The artists who don't even have galleries yet are doing really different things. They'll work in all sorts of different media to get whatever the message is they're trying to get across. They work collaboratively, which exclusively. There are artists who only work on public arts projects. There's so many different possibilities. So how to focus what you're collecting? And so I asked these questions, what are the last 3 things you bought? What are your favorite objects? And most importantly, what do you love about them? Because it's really getting to know more verbally for yourself, more consciously about what you're surrounding yourself with. What are your interests? What's your purpose? So are you trying to collect work because it's investment? Is it a hobby? Is it an obsession? Intellectual stimulation, emotional satisfaction, self-knowledge, or just the hunt? And again, those are questions, I think maybe probably all of the above is probably true. But it's just asking those questions for yourself about why am I feeling this way when I collect a work of art, which is very, for me, excited and moved, and I have a relationship with that work when I get it home forever. And you don't stop looking at it. And so, what is it for you that you're looking for when you collect work? I will say that when I'm collecting work, you can collect work that is really soothing, but you also might collect work that sort of jars you a little bit. But I find the artworks that I have the most intense relationship with are the ones that made me a little uncomfortable. It sort of stretched me. I couldn't exactly know why. Often if you actually have a reaction to something like in a bad way, that to me I would ask you to ask yourself that question, why are you having that reaction? And again, it's about learning about who you are. I think it's a really important way to have a relationship with work you're looking at. Why am I soothed when I look at that? Why am I angry when I look at anything? So you're having a relationship with that work. I'm asking you to think about why it is. Here's some other things that you care about in the work itself. Not the subject, but how it's made. Are you looking for how it's made? Do you want beauty? Do you want ugliness? Do you want shock? All of those things above. So again, just sort of examine what it is that you want to experience and push yourself a little further in those directions than maybe you are comfortable with at the beginning. This just happens to be just our side table next to our dining room. And so, this is a Frank Boyden vase. This is actually a little goat from Mexico. This is a little thing from Bali. These are both Japanese woodblock prints that David bought when he lived in Japan. So, and looking at it all together, you're actually seeing a bunch of mixed messages, but altogether it represents who we are individually and as a couple and what we like to surround ourselves with. Here's a very important one. Again, I'm actually asking you to be a little intentional about what it is you're looking for in the work you're purchasing, but I would also ask you to be intentional about money. I put money away every month into an art fund. I think about what my income is, what I can afford, how much room we have left in our house. I know what I'm comfortable with, and so I put that away, and then once a year-ish, I buy something. Sometimes I don't put the money away. Sometimes I actually put it on layaway and pay for it over a year. I think it's a really important thing to budget it into your life. Because I think it's an important thing in your life. Plan for it. Have money. Figure out what price range you can afford comfortably, and then amass work from there. I used to acquire things at a much greater rate when I was younger, but since our house is now full, we rotate artwork, by the way. So a lot of the prints never get framed. I have a print drawer, so a lot of the prints are in there. But now I generally only buy one piece a year. It's a little more expensive. Gifts and special occasions. David and I often buy things for our anniversary, one piece for our anniversary of a year. When we travel, that's our thing we bring back from traveling. There's other ways, but really think about your budget and what you want to, how you're going to get the things that you want to acquire. So, buying, access. So I've told you about get yourself on the gallery's mailing list, artist mailing list, so you know about the artists that you're interested in. They're having shows. Sometimes there's special projects, not even shows. Sometimes I have some other project I'm doing that isn't related to the gallery at all. I send that out as an email to my collectors as well. And of course, if you really care about some work, you want to have a discussion with the gallerist or the artist before the show happens to make sure that if that's the piece you wanted, you don't lose it. But even on preview nights, if you're on the gallery's mailing list, you will be invited to the preview night. Even if you haven't made an arrangement previously to see the work and buy something, you still have a good chance of getting what you want on a preview night. Most galleries take a payment plan. Our plan here is 3 equal payments over 3 months, and then you get the work at the end of the 3-month period. That can be negotiated depending on what your budget is and what the price of the work is. Every gallery is different, so I can't speak for other galleries, but I'm pretty sure that every other gallery does a payment plan. Discount, something that you probably don't want to expect. I will say that for me personally as an artist, I will discount work 10% if they're buying more than one piece. I'm not speaking for anyone else but me. Documentation. When you're buying work and you're starting this collection, it's a really good idea to get a resume and keep that receipt. When 30 years from now, you're wanting to donate it to either an art auction or a museum, if it's of that quality, you need that information. It adds to the provenance of the piece, of how long you had it, what you paid for it, where you got it. All of that's really important information. I sort of dealt on this a little bit. So are you looking for something you know already or something that you don't know? Oh, by the way, this is part of my, this has been moved, but these are part of my bird collections. 2 things I want to say about that. One is, you should expect, because an artist is doing something specifically for you, you're probably going to pay a little more for that work than you were if you were just buying something that was already made. And if it's too far afield from what that artist is known for, in the end, it may not be worth as much, because usually, I mean, in history, the thing that they're most known for is what holds the value the greatest. And then, what is the media that attracts you? And again, you don't have to limit yourself to one. It's just about asking yourself those questions. Where do you want to focus your collection? If you've already got a bunch of things that you've already collected and you've done this self-test, what is it looking at your own collection that's making you go, this really satisfies me, I want more of this? And when you're looking at the galleries all the time, figure out how that would fit into one of the subsets of your collection. So this collecting process is a process. So something you buy when you're 20 may or may not be the thing that you still love at the end. If you actually, in your mind sometime, want to leave work to a museum, you need to actually involve the museum when you make the purchase. Generally be a hole in their collection. A way to have access to curators is, there's all sorts of different groups at the Art Museum. There's the Gilkey Center focuses on prints. There's the Contemporary Arts Council. And so there's a way to have access to get to know the curators as well as, in this venue, artists, in that venue, curators. And so that's one way to access work if you've thought ahead, or if you're just lucky and then, there's a hole. You can donate it to, there's a lot of art auctions around. You might donate it to there. You might donate it to museums that are further afield, either a university, academic institution, probably not the gallery, because the gallery really generally, the ones I know locally, don't have collections, but the institution itself does. They might be willing to accept work. There's also 2 places in town. There's a place called resaleart.com that carries regional artwork. It's down in Selwood area. There's Marilyn Murdoch Collections. I think she does mostly estates more than individual art. I doubt that eBay would be worth your while, but you could try. Prints, original prints, are a great way for someone on a tight budget to collect work. The cost is usually much less expensive. There is an incredible range of how prints are made, and they all have a different voice, which I think is really interesting. In the Northwest, there is a huge tradition of printmaking here. And that's partially because of Gordon Gilkey, who I mentioned earlier, who was the print curator at the museum, and he donated like 20,000 prints to the museum before he passed away about 10 years ago, I guess. And he taught at the Pacific Northwest College of Art. And the Northwest Print Council, which is now called Print Arts Northwest, is an organization that a lot of art educators started 30 years ago. And they all taught at the local institutions printmaking at that time. Unfortunately, a lot of the art institutions no longer teach printmaking, but PNC still does. And if you care about skill and craftsmanship, printmaking is certainly one of those that requires a lot of it. Prints and reproductions. So a fine art print is something that's actually made by the artist's hand, whether that's an etching with copper plate or lithograph with a stone or metal plate. And I don't mean offset lithograph, I mean a hand-drawn lithograph. Screen printmaking, monotypes, monoprints, as opposed to reproductions or giclées. So these days, artists who do a painting often might want to reproduce it without actually doing anything by hand. And so they'll photomechanically reproduce it, and that would be a reproduction or a poster. So there's no handwork that went into that by the artist. And a giclée is similar, with the exception that it's basically a reproduction that's used with archival materials. Unless the artist has actually done something specifically to use that media, it's a reproduction, and I would ask you to avoid purchasing them. In Oregon, there's actually a state law that it's called the Original Print Disclosure Act. And if you buy a print, a fine art print in Oregon, you can ask the person you bought it from for a copy of that. And on it, it basically tells you who it is, who's the artist, what's the media, what's the edition number, how many artist proofs or trial proofs there are, were there any other plates or states of this print. So all of that information you have the right to ask for legally in the state of Oregon. And that would inform you quite a bit about whether it's an actual print or not. Okay, so original print resources. So I already mentioned the Gilkey Center, both Print Arts Northwest. There's different LTLEAs. If you actually want to take classes or you're a printmaker and you want to work, there are all of those. Crow Shadow is, of course, over in Pendleton, but all Byte, Mars, Meridian, Flight 64, there's a couple of others in town where you can actually either go to edition work or sometimes Meridian does classes. There's various places where you can go to take classes: Sitka Center, PNCA, Oregon College of Arts and Crafts, PCC, Multnomah Art Center. And while every single gallery in town carries prints, the two that are that I would say that I think half of our members are printmakers, and Ogden is the other one in town that I'd say also really focuses on fine art prints. So this is actually about travel. I'm not collecting ceramics that I think are going to be in a museum someday. They're small things, and we actually use them, and they're actually great mementos from our travels. I would caution that if you're traveling and just buying work, be clear what you're buying it for. So if you're buying a masterpiece, that's going to take a lot more work than if you're buying ceramics, or these kind of ceramics. And so you just have to do a lot more homework if you're traveling abroad to buying work and bringing it back in. And of course, there's all sorts of other laws that have to do with, national treasure, depending where you are, or immigration and all of that sort of thing. And then often, if you were doing that, you'd absolutely want to do that homework and get it authenticated. Well, I'm going to stop here. Thank you so much for coming. And I hope you're enjoying the rest of the series. So continue on the series. I think they've been pretty good so far, I think. Well, thank you very much.